Have you had Etsy hold your money hostage in reserves? Today, I want to talk about why this happens, what reserves are, and how you can avoid this happening in your Etsy shop. Let's dive into this episode of Seller News. Hey everyone, what is going on? Welcome back to the Handmade and Beyond podcast and the Friday edition, which is the Seller News edition, where I talk about anything relevant going on that's newsworthy, things that you need to know about with your Etsy business or the e-commerce space so that you guys know what's going on and don't have to figure it out on your own. I'm here to help you guys out. I'm your host, of course, LL. Glad to be back with you guys, like I said today, and I have another really good episode for you guys. So welcome. Hopefully you had a good July 4th break or holiday. Hopefully you got some time off to spend time with family, friends, and of course you have all of your digits and didn't lose any fingers along the way. I'm sure if you did, you probably wouldn't be listening to this podcast, or maybe you would. Maybe you're in the hospital with missing fingers. I don't know. Let's just hopefully that didn't happen to you guys. I have all of my digits. I don't mess with fireworks anymore. And my dogs, they don't like fireworks. So I don't really want to, go out and set off fireworks while my dogs are cowering in a corner in my house. I don't think that would be really good. So let's dive into today's episode and let's talk about Etsy reserves and why this happens, what they are, and all that good stuff, so that you guys know what's going on if this happens to you. So probably the last time I've seen this many people PO'd and bent out of shape was their fee increase. When a couple of years back when Etsy did a fee increase, I'm seeing some really angry people out there on message boards complaining about the whole Etsy reserves situation. And anytime people mess with someone's money, that is key to get someone fired up. That is key to see the worst of the worst in people come out. And it's happening with this whole reserve situation where Etsy's basically holding people's money hostage, and they are not liking it. They're not taking too kindly when this happens. Hopefully this hasn't happened to you, but if it happens in the future or it has happened to you, I'm going to kind of dive in and talk about why this is happening, right? And I'm going to go straight to the source. This information is straight from Etsy, straight from the seller handbook. So hopefully you can avoid this happening. So what is the reserve situation? What's the Etsy's definition of reserves? So basically, if a payment account reserve is placed on a seller's account, what happens is a percentage of funds from each sale of a physical item is not available for deposit for a period of time or until the order is in transit with valid tracking added by the seller. So orders in reserve also have a default holding period. So if no valid tracking is provided, funds will be released after that period. And a lot of people ship out orders without tracking, like smaller stuff, or they use postage for vinyl items, things that they're doing that are super small, that can fit in an envelope. So a lot of those do not have tracking because they're not going to pay for first class when they can ship it for whatever the cost of a postage stamp is, which is way less. So funds are released from a reserve when the seller adds tracking to the order, or Etsy can verify that tracking shows the order is in transit. The order is moving. So if you don't have tracking, they're not going to be able to verify this. So I guess if you add tracking later, then they can verify that. If no tracking has been provided by the seller, a default holding period of time will be passed. So they put a default hold period of time. And I'm not sure if they actually define that. I think it just depends. And this is part of the thing that are getting people upset, because it kind of seems like it's willy-nilly. There's no set standards. So I don't know if I saw a specific amount of time. But anyways, moving on. So how can my funds be released earlier from a payment account reserve? So if you get a reserve placed on your account and you want the funds sooner, what can you do? Add valid tracking is what they're telling you. The reserve funds will immediately be released if Etsy can confirm the order has shipped. Again, not everyone can add tracking, which causes the frustration. Etsy isn't always able to confirm tracking for some carriers. If we can't determine an order is in transit, the funds will will be reserved for the full period displayed in the reserve section of your payment account. So you can see they're supposed to let you know in your payment account if something is put on reserve, how long they're going to hold it there. So it should be pretty clear there. So make sure you're checking there first. And they're saying that on average, funds from orders become available within 2 weeks of the order date based on an internal analysis of orders in reserve during 2022, so last year. All right. So why was a reserve placed on my payment account? I'm sure you already are going to figure this out because we've already talked about it several times. Mainly it happens, the biggest reason is because there's no tracking number added. But there are also other reasons. So Etsy goes on to say reserves are common in online marketplaces and protect sellers and buyers. Because mainly this is right to protect buyers. They don't want people to not send out a bunch of orders and then for them to close their account and just take the money and run, which has happened in the past. So it's to protect the buyers from that happening. But unfortunately, it does hurt the sellers a bit if the money is being held and they don't have it for a certain period of time. So they can help keep your payment account balance from becoming negative and your card on file being charged if you receive a charge back from a customer's credit card company or any other expected refunds or charges. Many sellers with a reserve may be receiving an increased amount of sales, so reserve funds can provide a buffer. So it's already a buffer if there's cases filed and returns filed and the money is not there, then they're going to charge your credit card. So this happens a lot with like newer sellers that get a lot of sales quick. They keep that reserve amount as a buffer. So they say basically, here are why reserves are placed on accounts. A sudden sharp increase in orders. Orders are consistently missing tracking information or tracking events. Orders aren't shipped on time. A recent increase in refunds, or you recently made your first sale on Etsy. So these are the reasons why you may see a reserve placed where it hasn't been placed before, or you just started Etsy and a reserve is placed. And these are all to protect the buyers, right? Etsy wants to make sure that it's a safe marketplace. They don't want people being scammed, because if that happens, it starts happening a lot, then Etsy's going to get a bad rap and it's not going to help any of us. And they go on to say, how can I avoid reserves in the future happening? It's the same stuff, right? Add tracking numbers to your orders, ship your orders on time, don't mark item as shipped before dropping them off at the carrier. So if you print out your labels and then you don't ship them for a couple of days, they just sit there without an update in their tracking. And that could cause a red flag to Etsy and them to put a reserve on your account, because that seems weird, right? I know a lot of people will print out their labels and then ship the stuff later in the day. That's fine. Just don't print them off and then wait days to ship out your stuff, because there's going to be no movement in the tracking, from the carrier on the tracking information. Respond to message from customers quickly within 24 hours if you can. Stay up to date on seller policies to ensure your shop remains in compliance. Strive for good reviews. So those are all the ways that you can avoid your money being held in Etsy jail, money being put in reserves. So if any of that stuff happens, make sure first and foremost you go to your payment account, you check and see if your stuff has been put on reserve. If it's not clear or it's not showing and you're still not getting paid, you can always email support@etsy.com as well, and they say that they'll get back to you. I know people are that's another thing that's making people mad, is they're getting kind of generic responses back. So check your dashboard first, your payment dashboard. It should show in there. It would be really weird for your stuff to be held and it not to show in your payment dashboard. So avoid getting frustrated. Just figure it out. Try to figure it out on your own first before reaching out, so you don't get a generic response and then it just kind of makes the situation worse. But I would say overall, it seems like most people's accounts are being put on reserve because you're not adding tracking information. And if you're one of the shops that doesn't have the ability to do tracking because you're shipping out stuff that's super light, then unfortunately, until Etsy changes it, it's just something you're going to have to deal with, and you're going to have to budget that money to be held for a certain amount of time until it gets paid out. I know it's not ideal. It's not an ideal situation, but you have to understand, I guess, why they're doing it. And if your shop over time is consistent, with the orders getting fulfilled and the getting good reviews and not having any cases or flags, maybe it's something that they can actually take that off, even if you aren't including tracking information. It doesn't say that, but I'm assuming at one point there has to be some way for them to do that, so it's not something that you're having to consistently deal with. I'm not really sure. And if you're a new shop and you get sales right away, you may see this happen, depending on how many sales you're getting, the amount of the sales. There's a lot of different variety of factors. So all the reasons I stated are why you could be placed on reserve, and it may not seem fair. It may not make complete sense to you, but at the end of the day, it's a protection mechanism. A lot of platforms have this. It's not perfect by any means, and I'm sure they're going to kind of continue to work on it because it has really upset a lot of people. Again, people want their money. They don't want it being held. But it's to protect the overall platform from bad actors. We can blame the fraudsters out there, the bad people that have, sold 100 things and then got paid and then closed their shop. That's the reason why this stuff is happening, unfortunately. So a couple of bad actors make it harder for everyone, just like most things. So hopefully that helps clear up the reserve situation. And if you are in the purgatory of reserves, you can work to get it out, or why it happened, can try to understand it a little bit, and can be less frustrated by it. That's all I got for today's news episode. This was kind of a big issue, so I wanted to spend the whole episode talking about the whole reserve ordeal, and maybe be a little bit of a voice of reason for you. And if you haven't already watched my new workshop, how to generate your first $1,000 a month on Etsy in just 30 minutes a day, make sure you guys get that. Also, you can do it without social media, which a lot of us don't like, right? It's a time suck. Make sure you go and watch that workshop at handmadeandbeyond.com, Etsy sales workshop. It'll help you guys get things moving in your Etsy business, give you some tips, tactics, strategies to improve, which is what we're all trying to do, right? That's it for today's episode. Have an amazing rest of your day. Talk to you guys soon.